You are listening to the MTech Group podcast series, your source for trends about automated QA testing for the insurance industry.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
Doing well, Gary. How are you?
I'm always well. I can't complain.
Yes,
Just that's the way it is. You get up at 4, go to bed early. That's life, right?
there you go.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was going to ask you a question. I mean, you've got a very long background in and around the insurance carrier business, from client side, from the vendor side. The question I had for you was, in all of that experience, where does QA sit? Like when it floats in and up to conversations, like how high does that go? And in terms of visibility?
Yep. Yeah, I've seen it evolve over time, Gary, and it still unfortunately is, case by case. But I mean, think of QA as a practice in and of itself, right? Out of everything inside of a life cycle when you're building a new platform or you're augmenting one, QA is the most metrics driven part of the life cycle where you can get a ton of information from, understand the condition of your technical stack. So, I've seen carriers kind of embrace that over the last, call it 7 years. There's still a long way to go, though, right? And you don't seem to think or see information and metrics go up the stack to answer your question specifically until there's a problem. Uh,
Right, right.
so
That's always when they ask.
yeah, what successful QA organizations have done is they've proactively put out coverage maps. They've proactively shown numbers of test cases and pass rates in different segments of the system in business speak, right? The ability to containerize application stacks today kind of allow you to go one for one and create, test suites or test cases and conditions that speak to the business and speak to executives. So really good ones kind of throw a coverage map out there. If they're getting close to go live cycles, if you've got a monthly deployment, you tend to see burn down charts become very popular and very informative to leadership to give them peace of mind and confidence that what we're putting out and what we're about to service, you can go ahead and tell your customers. You can sleep at night, all that good stuff. So hope that kind of covers
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
that does. That helps with where it is. Where do you think it should be? Like in terms of,
Yeah.
yes, coverage maps is great. It's an early warning system. It's also fantastic in business language, easy to understand where we are.
Yeah.
But as a strategic enabler for insurance carriers in particular, right? Because you have a
Sure.
flow that crosses more than one application. Where should it be, like in terms of the vocabulary of the conversation?
Yeah. I think the biggest angle or viewpoint or lens you can shine on things is through an automated mindset. So, I mean, if you really want to flip the script on showing command and control and confidence in your testing practice, you should start with the story of quality assurance and what it means. You should be bringing those practices closer to your developers, and out of the hands of, call it manual testers, right? And so automated tools, you start to get into that realm, as you know, Gary. People think it's a set and forget type of a paradigm, and it's certainly in and of itself a living, breathing application. So if you want to get to where the narrative should be, you've got to focus not just on coverage, but you've got to focus on speed. So how do you
Right.
actually scale your tests? How do you build regression suites in an incremental fashion that continually build confidence in the system? that are, you mentioned different hops, right? You've got very complicated stacks in the life annuity retirement spaces. How do your automated systems stop and start based on incoming files or flags or status reminders or push notifications? These are all highly orchestrated, highly developed, living, breathing applications that ultimately you want sitting as close to the developer as you can, right? So you're not having to spend weeks running things more on a manual basis or waiting for certain processes to start upstream, and then having to be reminded or having a manual push to continue the process. So automation, no surprise, right, is a big part of it. As I was answering your question, Gary, I was thinking more about, what you guys are seeing in terms of adoption of automation, right? Are you seeing kind of an influence or a bias towards what I'm describing, where people know they've got to, shift left is a big concept, but the adoption of automated tools at a more tactical level, what are you guys seeing on the street?
Great question. I think the way to answer it is the aspiration, for sure,
Mhm.
is to get into the automation. I think, though, the challenge, and these are my words, not what I've been told, but where to start, right? Because it's like a very large wheel across multiple ends. Organizations are looking for that end-to-end automation, but where do you start, right? And what we've suggested in our discussions is, and it's funny because it's actually one of the more difficult areas, is in and around where you drive new business, right? Because it's easy to take costs out, and yes, there's value to that, but our experience and what our customers seem to be leaning towards is, if I'm going to go down towards automation, it should be to help me make more money, right?
Yeah.
And drive business. And that's what we're saying. But again, where to start, how to start, the conversations when we come in and present the product, we bring kind of a context that they may not have had before. And I
Yep.
think that can help people to understand the starting point, if that makes sense to you.
It does. I think the evolution, you've made me want to amend the answer to my question on the prior one that you asked around, evolving and shifting your automation strategy. You always want to start with your high risk areas, right?
Yeah.
Your high risk or
Right.
your customer facing ones. So that's, the early stages of, new business underwriting, any sort of financial calculations, kind of account fund level calculations that are super important to maintain and account for over time as you're making changes to your system. You want to make sure your core calculators are intact, and to determine diminishing returns on how far you take that automation. But I mean, certainly it starts with those high risk, financially focused, client focused areas. Certainly.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the apps per hour is a fairly reasonable measurements, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're getting to the essence of the assembly line and inside of an insurance house. Folks pride themselves on keeping that line open,
Yeah.
and processing. Automated underwriting has certainly continued to advance and evolve and help that line scale. But yeah, keeping that process and that flow and that throughput, up and running, makes me think not just of the quality in results, but the performance, right? Being able to understand weak points, choke points inside of that process to go through, overall threshold testing and being comfortable with where your stack is from a new business underwriting perspective. yeah, it's very crucial to keep that assembly line up and running.
Right, right. Well, for sure. And the, I mentioned it's probably one of the more difficult aspects because of the permutations, right, or the combinations in the digital application. But the ability to map, let's take that as a flow, right?
Mm-hmm.
Application through to underwriting, successful or decline, right? Just those two simple flows, regardless of the combinations, right? Building that model gives people the ability to drive a tremendous number of test cases, right? I'm suggesting people have the time or the economics to run, several billion test cases, but you have the option to. But it does give people some insight into what they could be doing, right? Like when you're talking about coverage maps,
Mm-hmm.
if they're not covering every part of the combination tree, right? That coverage map is kind of hiding some things, right?
Could be. Yeah. You've got the aspiration, to use the word that you called out before, which is a good one. You've got the aspiration to hit the bell curve of scenarios. But real life doesn't work like that. There are certain aspects or certain permutations that are high risk potentially inside of your underwriting system that you want to just make sure get nailed down, or make sure that you're flagging and sending up to an underwriter to review. So, as much as as much as we in IT try to take the clinical view of things, there are those corner cases that are, financially risky, that you want to make
Right.
sure from a
Yeah.
technology perspective are covered. So whenever you're dealing with tools and automation, you want to make sure that the folks you're working with, and I know you're all over this, but I do find great comfort in making sure that industry experience is something that is layered over your technology shops, because you can create those tools that generate these, like you said, a billion test cases. You're not going to run them all, you're going to fine tune that, but you've got to be able to have that day in the life of an underwriter in your hip pocket or in the back of your mind, or when you're innovating tools that are becoming, more and more efficient in how they execute and operate, that you've got kind of that underwriter's mindset. Always gut checking and making sure that you're building something that's highly efficient in value, not just in quantity, but that overall risk mitigation quality factors that are
Right.
oh so important to insurers.
Right.
So
It's funny. I think I threw out a billion, and we use an example. If you take 30 questions with two answers, you look at the combinations of that in just in terms of the how many are there? It's just under 1.1 billion, right?
yeah,
And
that's right.
that's not a representative number of the typical application process, part A, part B, right? There could be 1,600 questions,
That's right.
and the combinations of that. So while we can generate the database, and I already mentioned, the economics may not be there to run everything. It does give people to pick the path or choose what they want to run, and then execute that within the set of tools that they already have.
Just put it on the cloud, Gary, and just turn up your volume. Just run them all, right? That's what I've
I
heard
did
people say, right?
I did the math on that, right? So if
Yeah,
you have to make some assumptions on your average runtime, let's say and I'm going to say it's 5 minutes. That's not exactly the way it is for our customer, but depending on the actual test case, it could be 15 minutes. It could be down to like 3 minutes. Well, let's just say it's 5 minutes. So now you're at 5.5 billion minutes. And if you took an entire data center with a million CPUs, you can do the math, right? And
that's right.
it's not an economical answer. It's it is plausible, but I'm not suggesting that people do it. But I am
Yeah,
suggesting those edge cases you referenced, if they're understood and you use the interface to select what you want, then you can run those. You
Sure.
can run the every time you wish as part of a regression, because as the app evolves or the back end underwriting rules evolve, you do want to make sure that you're capturing some of those, because I think you said it right, that those are the expensive mistakes.
That's right. Yeah, and going back to getting things as close to the developer as possible, we're in the age of CI/CD pipelines. We've got developers who are more informed and been armed with tools to heal their code and to understand broader pictures and impacts to writing more performant code. So, the more we can just spin up an instance, load data, and execute test cases, and know that from a development standpoint, when I'm done with work at night, this stuff's running in the background, and we're checked in and locked and loaded. And risk mitigation wise, you're just taking a lot out of the test cycle if you can build kind of that ideal sweet spot of daily build regression that the developers can spin up. It's very powerful.
Didn't you say that was autonomy? I think I heard you say that before. It's like providing autonomy in development or QA.
Yeah, I mean, what does one want? The autonomy, mastery, and purpose. I think that's what we seek as humans, according to folks out there. And so this is really where we're at. And if we can provide those tools to developers, then even better.
Yeah, that's good. I think we're getting close to the end. So is there one tiny piece of advice you would provide somebody as they begin their automation journey?
Yeah, avoid a lot of the noise. Keep your head down. Assemble the team that you need. Don't be afraid to share what your goals and visions are for your test practice. And day by day, you will build momentum. I the use case that comes to mind when you ask me that question is you're inside a shop that's putting out fires, very tactical in nature, and really unable to get out of its own way to build and innovate new test cases. But there is a way out, but it's incremental, just like with anything we've learned in software and in agile development is we are really incremental and coming out of this automated and with a new suite that empowers you. You'll be in a lot better shape. And also make sure you're measuring along the way, right? Make sure you're getting credits and capturing what you're saving in terms of duration or throughput or quality, defects avoided in production, all that good stuff. Keep the metrics flowing. So
measure once, cut twice. No. measure twice, right?
Yeah, let's measure twice. That's right.
Yeah. Exactly. Start somewhere, start small, but you got to start somewhere, right? So
that's right, Gary.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, great catching up.
Take care.
All right.